All right. Good morning, everyone. So this is the marketer's case for Drupal. My name is Kate Fogarty. I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about myself, give you my street cred. So right now, I'm the manager of online marketing at Acquia, which means I manage Acquia.com. Everything related to the website typically goes through me. I have a background in design and development. Went to school at the New England Institute of Art. My degree is in interactive media design, so it was kind of everything for the web and development. I've been working with Drupal for the past 5 years. I started with Drupal 5. I was actually laid off from my first job as a designer and wanted to freelance my design. So the best way to freelance your own designs is to be able to build your own sites. So I was like, hey, I'll build my own CMS. So I contacted a developer friend, and he's like, hey, instead of you developing your own CMS, I just discovered this new thing called Drupal. Why don't we try that? So that was what got me into Drupal. I've both used and managed Drupal as a marketer. I've developed some of my own sites, but primarily used it as a marketer, both manager and end user. I've developed over a dozen large-scale multilingual websites. How many people in the audience are developers, Drupal developers? Okay, a few of you. How many are marketers? Yay, that's what I was hoping for. How many are marketers that are currently using Drupal? Okay, so almost about the same amount, which is good. So why do we love Drupal as marketers? Well, the reason I love Drupal as a marketer is there's a module for that. Your boss comes to you and says, hey, I need this form to connect to my CRM. Well, there's probably a module for that. The other great things is the freedom you have with Drupal. We have such a great community that you can easily find what you want. And going back to there's a module for that. It's flexible and scalable. You can build small business sites, and you can grow that business and grow with Drupal up into the large enterprise sites where you need things like global localization, where you need connections to your CRM and to making big sales. The speed of delivery. So at my previous job before Acquia, we built 3 very large sites, fully translated into 3 different languages in 3 months. So if you have the right team, your speed of delivery with Drupal can be very fast, which is great. At that same company, they eventually looked at migrating off of Drupal and went with a proprietary CMS, and it took them 2 years and I think about $2 million to migrate one of their sites where we built 3 in 3 months. So I mean, you can kind of think of that comparison. I mean, I know that's one example, but one example I lived through. Another reason why, as marketers, we love Drupal is the open source and the cost, which is some of the reasons I just mentioned. It's huge. I mean, it's not completely free. I mean, the Drupal's free, but you've also got to think of your time and resources, so it does cost, but not quite the same as some proprietary softwares. So as a marketer, what do you need to be successful? You need things like better conversion rates. I hope these are things that you're thinking about. How can I make my conversion rates better? How can I sell something faster? Your integration. Integration with things like your marketing automation platform, your CRM, your analytics, all those types of tools that you might be already using before Drupal and things you want to use while you're using Drupal. You need to integrate with those things. Multivariate testing. I hope all those marketers out there are thinking about testing, if not already doing it. It's huge. Lead capture. How many people here work for B2B companies? Okay, maybe half. So the other half B2C? B2C, raise your hand. Okay, a few. So lead capture on the B2B side is huge. So it's something you need to be able to think about and that Drupal can do. As I mentioned with the integration, analytics. This is for the B2C, your direct sales. SEO. Everybody needs SEO. Be thinking about it, making sure you have the meta tag module and all those things available. Drupal has it. As a marketer, you want to be social. You want to have social content. You want to make sure your website is social. People are easily able to share your blog posts, your white paper, anything. Social. Personalization. This one's really big. How many people went to DrupalCon here? Okay, I got a couple. So during Dries' keynote, he talked about searching for a flight. And when he typed in wanting a flight somewhere, one of the sites came up and said, hey, you want a flight from Boston to wherever you're looking for? Well, it knew who he was already to knew that he was located in Boston. So personalization is huge as we grow. And Drupal is growing with it this way. Responsive design. I mean, everybody has a smartphone at this point, right? I'd expect so. I think my dad is the only one I know that doesn't have one just yet. So responsive is huge, and making sure your website looks great on mobile, looks great on your iPad. Drupal can do this. A/B testing. This one goes with the multivariate testing. You should be thinking about testing, and as a marketer, you have to be testing. And then localization and translation. This one is huge as your company grows and is global. You need to be able to quickly add languages, edit languages, and find the right tools to do this. And we can easily do it with Drupal. So another reason why we love Drupal. So I'm going to kind of go through some of these things I talked about of things to be successful with Drupal and how different companies are doing it today. So this is how Acquia.com is responsive. We actually just launched this new website, and I'll talk about it more as I go forward. But we made sure our site was fully responsive. And the cool thing about this is we don't have a separate mobile site. So all our content is the same on both versions. It really just scales. So it looks good on the tablet, it looks good on fully mobile, and I don't believe we actually drop any content, which is huge. So you're not going to miss something on our site. Next one is Centrum. So it took Centrum 14 days to create digital campaign sites. So these were microsites for their direct sales campaigns. And this kind of goes back to the speed of delivery. 14 days to build out these sites. I mean, that's huge. And for a company like Centrum, that's huge. They need this kind of thing. And they're easily able to test conversions when you build all these pages out this fast. Test out different landing pages. Some A/B testing. So I actually use a tool called Visual Website Optimizer. I'll mention it again later in my presentation. But this is an example of how I'm currently testing an asset on our homepage. So right here we have the Forrester, the time to consider open source for digital experiences. The next variation of the same test is our Drupal Commons social business software demo. So see a demo. And then the third variation of testing is an ebook, making the shift to open source first. So these are what we consider our early stage assets on our homepage. And I'm testing out a bunch of different assets to see which one will convert better. Because if one converts more than the other one, I'm going to leave that one up for a little bit longer to see how it's doing. I also use Google Analytics event tracking. So I can have events on each one of these clickable parts of this test to see maybe people click on the title more than they click on the big image. Or maybe they're just clicking on the button and they don't even realize the other elements are clickable. So making sure you track to be able to really get the full amount of your test. Whole Foods. Whole Foods has built out 340 unique Drupal sites. And the cool thing for Whole Foods is that when you go to Whole Foods for your local store, you're going to get that personalized custom site for you. So that's why they're using Drupal. So you don't just end up on one big corporate site. Each store is going to be customizable. Each store manager can go in and edit their specials for the day. They can go in and add whatever it is they want. So 340 sites is pretty awesome. So going to the localization stuff that I was talking about, translation. So when I started Acquia, we didn't actually have our site translated at all. But we decided to translate it into 3 different languages. And since we did, we've actually increased our local traffic by 30%. So that's an additional 30% of unique visitors on top of our total traffic, which is huge. So right now we're translated in French, Dutch, and German. And I think right now that's kind of our plan. I don't know if we're planning on translating into anything else. We use a partner called Lingotech. They have a really great Drupal module that hooks in. You can use node translation or entity translation with Lingotech. It takes your content and you can push it up to their service. They'll translate it, or you can translate it. They have 3 different types of translation. And then once it's approved in their software, push it back and it pushes right into your site. So you don't actually have to go in and copy and paste. You don't have to give somebody else permission into your website if you don't feel comfortable with that. Lingotech can do it for you, so it's a really cool software. And we increased our traffic by 30%. It's awesome. Now that you've seen some examples on how to get to some of these things and what different companies are using, how do we get there? As you're building your new Drupal site, or as you're trying to enhance your current Drupal site as a marketer, how do you get there? So most of you, sounds like, already has a Drupal site, so I'm sure you know about Views module. Views is huge. And as we learned at DrupalCon Portland, Views is actually going to be built into the core of Drupal 8 because it's very important. And as a marketer, this is a very flexible tool for you to use. Views templates will allow you, as a marketer, to go in and edit your page, edit your content. You don't need a developer to help you do that if you're using Views, which is really great. It's allowed me to be very flexible on my website. Another cool module is Workflow or Workbench. This one enables different for me, it enabled different departments to edit their own content. So not everything has to go through one person or one group of people. I added the Workflow module. Then I was able to give a role to my PR department and say, hey, you guys upload all your own press releases. Once you hit submit, it's going to go into a review stage. I can go review it to make sure you didn't add an image that broke my code on my site, and then hit publish without having to have the content come through me. So I think this one's huge. And why do we love Drupal? There's a module for that. So there's so many more modules that you can add to be agile. These are just 2 that I picked that I thought were very important and that have kind of changed my life. Different themes that can enable you. So I've actually only personally used Omega and Zen. So for this part of my slide, I did some research on the top most used themes, and these were actually the top 3 most used themes. Omega is responsive out of the box. You have to work with some media queries, but it's really awesome. And that's what we used when we built out our new version of Acquia.com. I haven't actually used Fusion, but I believe it's responsive, getting kind of a maybe. And Zen was my favorite prior to Omega. It starts with a nice clean slate. You can do a lot with it and customize, but there's hundreds of thousands of themes that you can go through. But these were the top 3 most used themes. And then integrating. So you need to integrate with everything. So there's a module for almost any marketing automation software you want. So when we, as Acquia, moved to Marketo, I think just about a year ago, we didn't know if they had a module. So you go to Drupal.org, go to the module section and type in whatever you want. We typed in Marketo. First thing that pops up is Marketo Munchkin. So there's a module already pre-done for the marketing automation software we need. ExactTarget has one as well. Acquia, I believe, has one as well. So these modules exist. You don't need to build them yourself. You can find them. Analytics. I mean, Google integrates with every analytics package. I personally use Google Analytics because it's free. But Omniture integrates with Drupal. I've used that at my previous company. Web Trends, there's any analytics software. So these things are really awesome. So what does this all boil down to, all these things that we've been talking about? Web experience management or web engagement management. Have you all heard this term? Yes, no, yes. So Drupal is WEM. That's how I think of it. So WEM can be content community commerce. WEM is integrating with a bunch of different softwares. The best of breed, you're already using ExactTarget for your marketing automation. Why would you move to somebody's proprietary marketing automation just because you want to use them for your website platform? So I remember when I first heard this term WEM, it's kind of a buzzword right now, I was like, I don't understand. What is WEM? And they're like, well, it's this unified platform. I'm like, all right, well, okay, well, Drupal's kind of a unified platform. And they're like, well, yeah. And I was like, okay, so Drupal is WEM? Yes, it really is. You can build WEM with Drupal because you're really integrating all these different things. You're unifying everything on one platform. You can have your content community commerce. You can have social shareable content all in Drupal. So this is kind of the big buzzword, and Drupal is WEM. So talking about being agile, Warner Music Group has over 250 sites for all their artists. They allow their artists to have creative freedom over their website. So they can spin up a new site, and their artist can have something customizable, but it's still on Drupal, and it's still one of their core templates that they have. So they can build these quickly and customized for each artist. They still have their uniqueness as an artist. Talking about integration as well, I mean, I've talked about this one a lot, so I kind of want to mention how Acquia did it specifically. So about a year ago, we moved to Marketo. We found the module. And is anybody here using Marketo currently? Okay, one. So Marketo has, for their marketing automation platform, forms and landing pages. And typically, they like you to iframe in their form into your site, and then you use their Munchkin, and it'll cookie you, and every time you come to the site, it'll pre-fill your form. Well, iframes kind of suck, so we didn't want to use those. And they're not always responsive, which is a bad part. And we were actually already using Drupal's user registration hook-in, because when people come to our site and fill out a form, we actually wanted it to create a user account. So when you come back and log in, or at some point if you register for like a free trial, our software that you actually get is part of our user registration. So we didn't want to have to make you fill out all these forms to get all these assets. And then, oh, you actually want to become a customer now? Well, fill out this form again. We want to know who you are throughout that whole process. So we built off of the Marketo Munchkin module and built an additional module on top of that where we actually hook into our user registration. So when you come to Acquia.com and you fill out a form, you're actually creating a temporary account, a temporary user registration, and then it knows you, it cookies you. So when you come back and you fill out, say, a longer form, we're starting to build our forms in early, mid, and late stage, it'll have the fields you already filled out pre-filled, so you don't have to do it again. And then when you get to that point of being a full customer, we know who you are. You just have to create your password. And it's still all syncing into Marketo. So once you are fully logged in and you come back and view one of our pages, you don't have to fill out a form again. It's going to say, hey, just download this asset, or hey, just view this webinar, or sign up for our webinar right now. We don't need you to fill out a form because we know who you are. So that's how we built it in, and then the Salesforce integration is with that. And then I also use Google Analytics. I put event tracking on everything. I love event tracking. I'm able to see who's doing what and where on my site with event tracking. I'll show you a little bit more when I get to the homepage redesign and how I track that. But that's how we did it a little differently with our integration, and it was fairly easy. Drupal makes it easy. So some additional help. So as marketers, we always love tools. We love best-of-breed things. So I'm going to talk through some of the tools that I use, some that I'm not using right now, but that are, I think, equally as important. So Crazy Egg. Has anybody here heard of Crazy Egg or is using Crazy Egg currently? One? Oh my goodness. You guys, you need to be using this tool. It's amazing. So this is a heat mapping tool. I have a slide later in here that'll actually show an example of what Crazy Egg can do. This has kind of changed my life. This one's very, very cool. With our new homepage, it shows you heat mapping of where people are clicking so you can see your hotspots. And it kind of ends some conversations every once in a while. You know, you'll be in that executive meeting where they're like, get rid of the resource menu item, nobody's clicking on that. It's like, well, you can kind of see in your Google Analytics that there's some traffic there, but the argument that came back to me on this one was, well, they're not getting it from our main menu, they're getting it from in our product pages because our resources are there. I was like, okay. So we added Crazy Egg to the page. We actually, in the meantime, I think prior to that, we had actually removed it, and our leads started to go down. And then we added it back in and put Crazy Egg on it, and sure enough, people are clicking on our resources tab in our main menu. So great tool. Should really look into it. It's really cheap. I think it's like $49 a month. It's not expensive. Google Analytics. Web Trends, so some analytics software. Marketo, other things like Acquia. I don't think I have one on there for this. Optimizely, so this is another A/B tool tester. I talked about Visual Website Optimizer, which is the next one here. Optimizely is very similar, so it's really your preference. I haven't actually used Optimizely. I've evaluated it, but I was already happy with Visual Website Optimizer, so I didn't need it, but I think they're a pretty similar price point as well. Exact Target, another marketing automation or email platform. Marketo, Exact Target, they're both very good. I've used both. Chartbeat. Has anybody heard of Chartbeat? I have one head shake. So as a marketer and as like a data-driven marketer, I can't use Chartbeat. There's really not much I can get out of it. You can't get reports out of it, but the really cool thing with Chartbeat is you can give it to your boss, and your boss can see what's happening on your site. So Chartbeat is a real-time monitor of your site to show what pages of the site your people are on, what content they're looking at, how did they get to your site, did they get there through social, and all these other things. So it's actually a really cool interface, and it's nice to look at. But you can get all your data from Google, but this tool is really great to give to your boss. So like my CMO can go in and look at it and say, hey, there's 300 people on our site right now. How cool is this? So it's really a cool software. So I wanted to kind of go through the Acquia.com redesign. So this was a huge marketing effort, and we've had some pretty good results. So I want to kind of walk through. So on the left was our site prior to the redesign. So it was very dark, very small. I know it's a screen grab, but that's really the end of our page. There wasn't much below that. And there's really only one major call to action, one big yellow button. And it kind of looks like a water company. We got so much feedback that they're like, well, we don't really know what you do. Do you sell water? There's a big drop in the background. Your company's Acquia, I mean, a lot of that. So then this is our new design, light, long page, very bright, multiple calls to action. This kind of before and after and where we're at. So kind of talking through some of our marketing goals in this redesign. So us being a B2B company, our main goal is to increase leads. And then we also wanted to improve our messaging and provide relevant content. I mean, you saw how short our page was before. There's not a whole lot of relevant content. So with getting to this new design, our first step in the whole design process was really gathering our key stakeholders into one room. And we actually created a Pinterest board and said, hey, everybody in this room, go pin your favorite B2B marketing sites. And so we did that. We created this board, and then we went through it as a group. And we're like, well, what do you like about this site? What do you like about that one? What don't you like? All these big companies spend a lot of money on testing and a lot of money on research and user research. So why not look and see what they're doing and use some of those things? We can be smart about how we get to our key design. We saw a lot of people starting to do the longer pages. So we actually tested it on a different page within our site. People are scrolling. People have no issue. That above the fold concept doesn't exist anymore. With tablets, with mobile, everybody is fine scrolling up and down. It's not a problem. And then the big button calls to action up higher on your page. That seemed to be a big thing throughout most of the sites. So we got some of our ideas that way. Another thing we did is once we started our design process, we used this tool called Verify app. We actually have a UX team in Acquia. But if you don't, this Verify app is pretty awesome. You can go in, you upload your app, and then people go in and just kind of give it a feel, a mood test. Does this design make you feel happy? Does it make you feel sad, or does it make you feel indifferent? And kind of gauging this. So you can actually see this isn't the design we went live with. This was one of the ones that we tested in the meantime. We weren't really happy with how much indifferent we had. So we kind of tested a few more. But you can use this, which is really neat. So then kind of looking at our overall design and kind of thinking of some of those goals that we had, we have so many more calls to actions. I mean, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 main calls to action on this page, where before on that old one that you saw, we had one yellow button. Our messaging is different. We have direct messaging. Our main message prior to this was the Enterprise Guide to Drupal. I know what that means, but anybody just coming to our website didn't necessarily know what that meant, or what does that really tell you that we do. So now we have where great digital experiences begin, and this kind of pulls in the digital experiences. Dream it, Drupal it. Our image before was that big water drop, which led people to think that we're a water company. So giving these different devices, you can see that it's flexible, it's responsive. You can imagine whatever you want in there, which is kind of why we put the origami birds in there. And then getting right into our messaging, so agile, resilient, integrated, kind of getting into that direct messaging, and then getting into relevant content. So with this long page, we're actually able to put a lot more relevant content on there. As you can see, the dig in section at the bottom is getting you right into our assets, the key things that we want. So the early stage asset, the scan your site to get your insight score, and then the late stage asset. If you've already kind of evaluated us, where are you at? And you can click right into it. We also have careers up there pretty high, because careers in general at Acquia is a really important thing. So then going into the calls to actions and the buttons, we increased our conversion rate by 9% on one of these buttons by adding more of them, adding different language and testing. So this is the Crazy Egg software that I was telling you guys about. How cool is that? You can see that our See a Demo button down on the right gets clicked a lot. And then that Get Started used to be our Talk to Sales button, and that was actually our main call to action on the first site, so that big yellow button. Our conversion before this, to kind of give you an idea, for that Talk to Sales button was about 1.5% conversion rate. So what I did is in Visual Website Optimizer, I tested out the language on that button, so it said Talk to Sales. Well, sometimes people just don't really want to talk to a salesperson. So we tested Get Started, we tested Get a Quote, we had Talk to Sales in there, we had Contact Sales, we had Contact Us, and we tested all these different ones. And Get Started actually had the highest conversion rate. And not only click through on the button, because you have to think about click through on the button is one conversion rate, but then actually the form fill on the back end is your key metric that you really want to look at. So getting to click your button is great, but then getting them to fill your form is even better. So increasing this to a 9% conversion rate, industry standard on B2B conversion is about 3%. So this was pretty huge. We have quite a few of these contact sales buttons throughout our pages. And then our organic traffic. Adding the relevant content to your page can be really good for Google. Google likes it. Before, we didn't really have much content. I mean, you saw that short page. We didn't have a lot of content about what we did. We didn't have a lot of content about what we offer, what's going on with Acquia, but now we do. So we've increased our organic traffic by 15%. We launched between the March-April thing. January, February is seasonal. Our traffic's typically down. The seasonality of things, I'm sure you guys have seen some of that in your own businesses. Each one's a little different. But for May, having been live for more than a full month prior, we really saw that increase. We had better internal links on our homepage because it was longer. It allowed for more links, more content, more relevant content, and more testing. So lessons learned in this whole process. We did this whole build out in 3 months. So we decided, we had a new CMO that started in December, and he came in, he's like, I don't really love the site. I was like, I don't really love the site either. Well, let's redesign it. So our Q1 goal for everything digital marketing, online marketing, was site redesign. So we literally started doing the design, doing the research around the design, and the whole build out from beginning of January all the way down to the end of March to early April. So kind of talking about some of the lessons learned. So build mobile first. If you want to be responsive, you can't take well, maybe you can, but it's very difficult, taking a current site that's not thought about, when it was built, wasn't thought about being responsive, and making it responsive. We tried to do that with the site that you saw prior, that dark blue site. It was hard. It didn't look good. We actually at one point ended up just removing our banners from our mobile version completely because they wouldn't fit and wouldn't work. And then we actually made one of our banners important and relevant, and then we lost all that relevant content on our mobile site. Not good. So with this new design, really thinking mobile first and making sure your designer is on board with thinking mobile first. Making sure they're building their design that'll easily be responsive and fold up. And providing a full-out mobile version of their design. We wouldn't actually start building our design until our designer gave us what the mobile looked like in the vertical and the landscape versions, because our developers didn't want to guess. We wanted to make sure it worked that way. Watch your data. At this point in the game, everybody should be really data-driven marketers. Watch your site traffic. Watch those event tracking. I know I mentioned I talk about it a little bit more, but put event tracking on every element of your page. So on that home page, I really went through and looked at every clickable item I had on there and put a Google event tracking on there. And I kind of came up with my own naming scheme. And then I was able to look at that in aggregate a month after and see, hey, people are clicking on my first and second panels, which you kind of expect. Those are the typical above the fold. But then for me, panel 9, which was our resource panel at the very bottom of the page, people were getting to. That was our third most clicked panel. So kind of thinking back to that whole long page above the fold, if people are getting from 1, 2 to 9, nobody's having any issue scrolling on our page. And then also that kind of brings the attention, well, maybe that resource stuff is some relevant content and things people want. Maybe we need to start thinking about moving that stuff up and looking at that data. And then seeing what elements on your page are the most important. And then my favorite lesson learned in this one is design approval. So this is a picture of Tom Erickson, who is the CEO of Acquia. When we first started doing the redesign in Q1, we talked to him about it and said, hey, we're doing this. He's like, oh, cool. We showed him some of our wireframes, and he's like, okay, this looks great. And then we forgot to bring him in on any of the rest of the design approvals, where we're at with the design. We got to the end of March. We're like, yes, we're going to hit our Q1 deadline. We go into the executive meeting Monday morning and said, hey, we're launching this Thursday. Have a look, see what it is. And he was like, why haven't I seen any of this? We're like, oh, you haven't seen any of it? And he held us up for 3 additional weeks on design changes to his liking. So huge lesson learned here. Make sure your CEO knows what your marketing website is going to look like prior to launch. He needs to be your biggest advocate when it comes to the main homepage, the one page that everybody's going to see, really the face of your company on the internet. So my mistake. I won't ever do it again. I learned a huge lesson there. So please learn from my mistakes. And then iterate. You want to continually iterate on your design. I mean, if you think of something like Amazon.com, if you went to Amazon.com 6 years ago, kind of think back what you thought it might have looked like then and then what it looks like now. It doesn't feel like it ever really changed, but they slowly iterate on it, and it's a totally different website now than it was 6 to 10 years ago. But if you go there often, it doesn't really feel like it because they just slowly iterate on their design, so it doesn't feel like an aggressive change. This is how we want to go forward as Acquia. and that things that worked well. People don't like change, so slowly iterate on it and test, continue testing. Getting the right data to make the right decisions and educated decisions. So when somebody comes to you and says, well, get rid of that button, I can go and say, hey, this button has a 9% conversion rate. We're not getting rid of it. And they're going to be like, oh my God, I didn't know. I just didn't like how it looked. Aesthetic isn't everything. So making sure you make those decisions and those educated decisions. So guys, that's kind of it for me. Do we have any questions? Yep. Sure. So the question was my event tracking in Google Analytics and kind of showing what that would look like. I know, I'm like, how do I get to this without showing too much of my data? Actually, I know how I can do it. I'll pull it up. I'll show you too, because it was kind of a two-part process for me. I actually went through, and it's a little manual. I think you can do it with JavaScript. You don't have to have it be as manual. I wanted full control of how I name things, so I chose to do it that way. I'm going to show you my doc that I created originally to make sure I got everything in my naming scheme. Page tracking.
Just tell me where to put my hands over the screen.
No, I'll pull it up right. Actually, this doc, is it going to pull over? Oh, there we go, that way. So I created this Google Doc, and this is actually my testing phase, so I kind of went through every part of my page and thought about the things that I wanted to make sure I was testing. This is where I want to make sure I can, current site, page, well, we did some page load testing, event tracking, this is what I want to get to. So I literally looked through every clickable item I had on my page, and I gave it a naming structure. It's actually helpful for me too, because I can't really see it from this angle. Cool. Can you see that? So our page, if you saw it, has like the white panels, the blue panels. So I kind of named everything panel 1, 2, 3, all the way down. So I had a nice reference, and each item within that panel has its own event track item, and I have my same naming scheme. I named everything homepage so I could easily find it within Google Analytics. So this is kind of where I started. And then let me show you. Oops, I gotta go this way.
That's really awesome, by the way.
God, I'm glad you like it. I've actually been using this kind of a template for other pages within my site that I really want to look at. So then let me show you what it looks like in Google Analytics and how you can actually pull it all together. And things have shifted a little bit since we launched. So I know I said in my presentation that panel 9 was the third panel. It's not anymore. It was after the first month. It's kind of shifted now. Can you see that? We control plus this bad boy. All right, so I clicked into the homepage group, and then you see panel 1, 2, 3, 5, 4, 9. So 9 is still pretty high up there. And then if we say we click into panel 1, you can see in order what's getting the most clicks. So that see a demo is huge. And actually something we learned out of this, as I see it on here too, is the customer login on Acquia.com's homepage is vital to our business. We didn't actually know this prior to redoing our homepage. We actually thought that once you became an Acquia customer, you went to the customer portal and you didn't actually come to Acquia.com's homepage. Well, surprise, they do, because we actually had removed not our login completely, but we removed our customer link off the homepage. And within the first day, we had a lot of complaints coming to us that says, hey, how do I get to the network now? And it was like, oh, we didn't realize people did, but we didn't have this tracking on it before to know. So you can see number 2, customer login. So our customers are coming to Acquia.com to log in. And then our talk to sales button, like they was talking about that 9% conversion rate that increased. Our see a demo button was actually new. We never had a demo link, a demo call to action on our homepage at all. By adding this demo, we actually brought in an additional 100 leads off the first month of having it. So that's 100 leads that we just never had before by adding this call to action. So having the multiple calls to action and thinking more than just that one talk to sales action has really helped us out. Did this answer your question?
So those are actual, so just see a demo is getting 3 times as much action as any of the stuff we had on before?
Yeah, and I don't directly compare it to this one because this is new, so I didn't really have any data to look at it prior and now. Our insight scan, which I didn't have data prior to that, actually had a 40% conversion rate from our homepage, which was, or 42% I think, which is outrageous. So out of all the traffic that came to our homepage, 42% of those people actually scanned their site with our insight tool. So these were just some cool stats that we got because we did things like this. Any other questions? Why did I choose Drupal? Well, actually, I came to Acquia to stay on Drupal. So Drupal was pretty huge for me. I worked at a company prior, which I mentioned a little bit, that when I started, they had just built their first Drupal site, and they didn't actually have anybody there that managed it. They had contacted this agency. They're like, hey, we want this kind of news aggregation site, build it. So they built it on Drupal and handed it back, and then nobody knew how to use it. And I had just started as a web producer, and they're like, hey, we have this new site, it's running on Drupal, does anybody know how to use it? And I was like, ooh, I do, I'm just learning. And so I then took over managing that site because I was the only person who knew how to use it. And from there, we're like, wow, this is a really cool platform. And at that point, which is kind of sad, our corporate website was actually just built off of HTML and PHP files, no CMS at all. So we then moved all of our main sites to Drupal. And we built out over 12 sites that my team alone was managing. And 3 being multi-sites with fully fledged language. We had Brazilian Portuguese, Spanish, and English. And really built those out. And then our corporate headquarters came in and said, hey, well, you guys in the US are doing this cool thing on Drupal. Well, we don't want to use Drupal, and now we're mandating that you use this other proprietary software, which was when I gave the example of 2 years and $2 million. And so at that point, I started looking. I'm like, I really love Drupal. I love managing Drupal. I love working on Drupal. I want to stick with it. So then Acquia became the obvious choice because they're not going to use another CMS software. We're using Drupal. And so that's how I came to Drupal. And Acquia is definitely not going to run on something other than Drupal. So I do love it.
How formal is the actual website roadmap?
Website roadmap is pretty formal. Actually, that's kind of one of my priorities for the next 2 weeks is to get my roadmap ready for the rest of the year. So, I mean, my goals within the roadmap really come down to marketing's needs and what we want to add to the site and change the site to make sure we fit marketing's. And then engineering, our engineering team has like the technical roadmap. But right now, it's fairly fleshed out. It's not complete. Right now, we're really working on an in-details forms project, which hopefully will roll out in the next week. So if you visit Acquia.com now and then visit Acquia.com in the next few weeks, our form structure is going to change a little bit. We're allowing our forms to be more flexible. So per node, I can change which form fields are showing on my page. So right now, I can either do a small registration form or like this full reg user account. And I don't have much customization in between. So you can see in B2B marketing that people don't like to fill out 15 fields on a form. They're going to see it and be like, ugh, I'm just going to close that. I don't want to fill it out. So we're allowing for that flexibility, and I can go into each node. So one white paper might want 5 fields. One white paper might want only email, and I can customize that. So we're rolling that out, which is going to be huge. And then we're just continually iterating design stuff. We're looking at redoing our career section. We want to kind of make some adjustments to the homepage based on some of this data that I showed you, pull the resources up a little higher, adjust some of our content sections that we feel should get more attention.
How often do you adjust the roadmap based on the data? Like, on...
So my team will actually adjust plans based on data weekly, monthly. I mean, we work on the agile methodology, so we have Scrum meetings, and my team meets 3 times a week, and we kind of talk about where we're at. I'm constantly looking at data and seeing what's going on. So if I see something on my homepage, so say like panel 4 is getting no clicks, well, that's a problem, and we have to figure out why. So I don't have any issue going to my designer at that point being like, Drew, these aren't working. What can we do to revise it? Coming up with a design, and then testing and adding it in. Maybe get some UX testing. Maybe put some of the elements into Visual Website Optimizer and fully test those elements to see how it changes. So we can change that. I usually have 1 to 3 major tasks per quarter. So my roadmap can really change per quarter, but the changes based on data, I think, take priority. Yeah, so I'll change those often. Anybody else? Any more questions? If you have any questions or want to see anything that I talked about, feel free to come right up to me, and I'll be here for most of the day at the Acquia booth, and I don't have any problem walking through or kind of talking through some of the things that I've done or that I've learned with Drupal for marketers. Thanks, guys.